So hello everybody and welcome to an introduction to one of our panelists for the CEO forum for SID's Display Week 2021. We have a really good panel this year with really rich and deep experience in business, and we wanted to make the most of them rather than just the brief introductions in the main. The one I'm going to talk to today is Jill Wittels, who's President and Chief Operating Officer of Nexteon Technologies. That's a startup, but she has other affiliations which bring her into the display industry. So, hello, Jill. Good to see you again. And can you start by introducing yourself and your career?
Certainly. So, my career is long, many decades, and follows a rather interesting arc. I started out as a physics major at MIT, mostly because I thought engineering was a little too cookbook and physics was much harder. So there's a masochistic streak there that probably follows me through my career. And then I stayed on at MIT to do a PhD in astrophysics. And as Bob knows, I frequently refer to myself as a lifelong recovering astrophysicist. After graduate school and several years as a postdoc in the same research group, I was really in a mental dilemma about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, because I didn't really want to teach at the university. And I took a year to become an American Physical Society Congressional Fellow, which is a program that most of the scientific societies actually run, where they pick 1, 2, 3. AAAS does about half a dozen, and they send career level PhDs to Congress primarily, although some other agencies as well, to help advise the political process with better understanding of technology and science issues. And I thought that would be fascinating, and it was. I spent a year in a Senate office as a staff member, if you will, free to the senator, paid by the society, and worked on a variety of political and technology issues. And I spent the year figuring out what to do next. And what I did next was to go into industry. I went to work for Honeywell in Lexington, Massachusetts, in a division of Honeywell that was doing all things infrared. Military equipment, instruments for atmospheric chemistry study with NASA and NOAA, sensors for telescopes to do infrared astronomy. It was a really interesting technology for me to get into. And as I like to say, it was a small spectral shift from radio into IR. And we did many things IR. And I thought I would go there for a few years and then go find a different job somewhere else. But every few years I would ask to be moved into another job. And 20 years later, I was the president and general manager of that division, because I kept sort of moving around and moving my way up. And I always wanted more responsibility, and they gave it to me. So that ended up being a long stay. After that roughly 20-year period, the division had been sold a number of times. First, we became part of Loral, and then Loral became part of Lockheed Martin, and then Lockheed Martin sold a collection of businesses, including mine, to BAE Systems North America. At which point, I was sort of burnt out on that process. And the opportunity arose to go work for the people, the executives who had been the executives in Loral, but by this time had started a new company called L3 Communications. So it was a job working for the CEO of L3 Communications in Manhattan, where the offices were, and basically overseeing the company's technology investments across the whole corporation. So L3 Technologies was a company very, very heavy in many different kinds of tech. Most of it military. There was a whole group of company in aviation and aviation equipment. When I got there, there was very little in night vision or photonics, because that had been left behind in Lockheed Martin. And the CEO who's the best guy I ever worked for, said to me, we have to build a segment in photonics and night vision and infrared and all of those technologies. He was a very acquisitive guy. We bought 5 or 6 companies a year, and he said, let's build a segment in that. And we did. We started with a systems company that made FLIRs, and we kept adding. Interestingly enough, almost every company in the industry came on the market in the next 5 or 6 years, with the exception of the business that I had previously worked for, which did not come on the market. And within about a period of 5 years, we had $1 billion in revenue in all the technologies associated with photonics and night vision and sensing, if you will. So that was a very interesting way to put a business together. I worked in that job for almost 11 years through the death of the first CEO and the replacement with a new management team, which was a bit of a struggle in a way. And then I kind of hit myself in the head one day and said, you know what? I've been working in large corporations all my life. It's time to go early stage and see what I can do there. So I retired, in quotation marks. It makes my husband really laugh to say that word because, of course, I never stopped for a short time. And the very first thing I did when I left there actually was to come in as chair of the board of Imagine, which was how I really got into the particular display part of this. When I was doing night vision sensors, of course, we were making mixed mode integrated circuit, thin film, infrared sensors, very, very similar technology. And we had our own design group and we had our own fab. And so moving to Imagine was sort of the other half of the problem, because when you build an infrared sensor, you have to have a display. After all, your eye can't deal with this until you put light back into it that you can see with your eyeball. So we had displays that went with the sensors that we built, but we didn't make them. So now it was shifting over and saying, okay, let's look at making the displays. And I have been on the board of Imagine and now chair the board of Imagine ever since. And that's my involvement in SID, really. But at the same time, I did a little bit of consulting. I became an angel investor in startup companies. I volunteered at MIT to be part of their venture mentoring services, which is a program for developing entrepreneurs and their entrepreneurial skill. I did advising work to a number of startups. And then about 4 years ago, I actually said, okay, this one looks really interesting. I'm going to let myself get sucked into this. And I became one of 4 founders of Nexteon, which is a company that is trying to modernize the management of airspace because it is so inefficient. And in addition to the fact that that's a bad way to run things, it's also a bad way to manage carbon emissions. So if you want to be able to fly and reduce carbon emissions, there's a tremendous amount that can be done just by improving the tools and methodologies and the technology used to manage airspace. So that's where I am today.
Wow, it's with the classic portfolio career. You've been in almost everything. Yeah. And you made a shift from the technology side, PhD, astrophysics, into commerce and management and industry. So was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, I was very conscious that the year that I worked in Washington in Congress, I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do next. I had done, as a postdoc, I had done a number of interviews for faculty jobs, and I decided I really didn't want to be an academic for a long list of reasons. I wanted to step away from research because of a timescale problem for me, not for the industry. When you do academic research, particularly in a field like astrophysics, where you can't build a universe in the lab and poke it and test it, you have to kind of deal with the universe that you're handed, and sometimes it gives you information, and sometimes you have to wait for that information. So I found that the time scale for accomplishment was too long for my psyche. I needed to be working on things where the time scale for accomplishment and job satisfaction was much shorter. And I also found that although, my colleagues and I were all great at technology and science, I was way better than they were at management. Most of them didn't want to have anything to do with management. And we did big experiments, telescopes spread out across the globe, all needing to do the same thing and point to the same place in the sky at the same time. That takes logistics and management. And I was good at it and I enjoyed it, and they hated it. So I said, you know what? I should move into industry. Things move faster, and I should be the person that is making things happen and let the technical people do the technical work. So it was a very deliberate thought process, and it was exactly right for me.
Great. The other area I wanted to pick up on, you mentioned when we spoke before, was about the fact that you enjoy passing on your knowledge and experience in mentoring and education. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background on that.
Well, I guess it proves that I wasn't completely allergic to teaching when I decided not to become a faculty member, but I enjoy that more in a more intimate sort of one-on-one problem-solving session. So for example, the mentoring service at MIT does team mentoring. You're always part of at least a 3-person mentoring team. And the entrepreneurs that you're mentoring, it's their job to come in and say, okay, here are the problems I have. What should I do about this? And part of the reason for a team is to make sure that you get different perspectives and points of view, that you're not just getting one person's view of what the right thing to do is. But you see, I mean, you can volunteer for companies that are in many different spaces, and they're all MIT associated people, so they're all really smart people, although some of them are really trying to do some pretty kooky things. But you can kind of pick the ones you want to volunteer to work with, and it's really gratifying when you can help someone get over a particular problem, or pivot at the right time, or network them to the resources that they need to get that job done. Networking is incredibly important for everything that everybody does, so throughout the career. So it's also part of that networking scheme. One of the companies that I've been mentoring at MIT just recently showed up at my angel group for fundraising, which I have put a gap in because there's a conflict of interest rules. But that was really gratifying because they had been struggling for some time, and now they had gotten themselves well enough organized to really go out and raise money, which is what they needed to do. So yes, I enjoy that process of paying it forward, if you will, and working with people. But really, I'm a problem solver, so it's very much in this help people find solutions to the problems that they're facing.
Cool. I have to say, I've been an editor for 25 years, but one of my joys is the number of editors in the business that I've started and taught. So yeah, I understand that one. Thanks very much for your time today, Jill. I want to encourage everybody to come back to see the full CEO Forum chat, because as I mentioned, all our panelists are really excellent and really have such a great deal of experience and knowledge about how the worlds of industry, technology and business work. So thanks again, Jill. And
my pleasure.
Look forward to you on the forum.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.